Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Sister Sister, a podcast for spiritual baddies. We are your hosts, Ellen and Maya. In today's episode, we'll be talking about familiars.
A much lighter topic compared to our last episode. So, this is a topic I want to discuss this season because we've talked about a lot of different parts of witchcraft and witchy things, but familiars haven't really come up yet, and I think that they're honestly a really interesting idea. So, we're gonna first start off by giving you the historical context of familiars, and then we'll go into what modern day ones are more like. And I'm also gonna tell you guys a little bit about my familiars, because I have two. They're a little sassy. So when we get to that portion, I'll tell you guys about how I acquired these two familiars. So, the historical context during the witchcraft trials in Europe in the 15th through the 17th century, familiars were seen as demons sent from the devil to aid witches in witchcraft. Often they were seen as possessing the bodies of animals to disguise themselves. If a suspected witch had a mole or skin growth, it was seen as the way that they kind of fed the familiar because it was believed that familiars had to feast on human blood. This also had its own kind of translation to the Salem witch trials, which is a little closer to home for a lot of us. The idea that witches would send their bird to torment the person they were afflicting. This was part of the whole fake evidence portion of the Salem witch trials, where they just allowed people to say whatever and it was entered in as evidence because there was no judicial system back then. Um, which this is what actually ended up condemning many accused of witchcraft to death in Salem. Once they kind of got rid of the whole fake evidence thing, there were very few people actually found guilty of witchcraft in Salem. Now, in modern paganism and witchcraft, many witches choose to incorporate familiars into their practice. In paganism, there is no belief of a devil or the Christian hell. Instead, depending on what type of witch you are, you worship or work with deities, divine forces that guide us through life. Some things that you may work with as well can be things like ancestors, plant spirits, animals, just general spirits, spirit guides, and any other sort of teacher or protector. Some people work with fae, some people work with sirens, whatever it may be, whatever finds you, that's kind of where you end up depending on your path.
So, there isn't a simple answer to this. There are many different paths in witchcraft who view familiars in different ways. Thanks to media, many people believe familiars are most often cats, which can be the case for some witches. But there's many other animals that can appear as familiars, both domesticated and wild. The main purpose of a familiar is to aid you in some way with your magical practice. Not every familiar is a pet, and not every pet is a familiar, which is where some people tend to have a misunderstanding.
It's okay if your cat is just a cat. It's okay if your dog is just a dog. It's okay if your parrot is just a parrot. Not every pet has to be a familiar, and you may not always have a domesticated animal as your familiar. So let's talk about familiars versus spirit animals. Familiars are meant to be almost a servant in a way. They aid a witch in their practice. Spirit animals are an animal guide that often has its own altar space and is more along the lines of a deity or ancestor who guides you and that you work with. Spirit animals are considered a closed concept for many different indigenous cultures. Specifically in Native American culture, it is closed in the way that they address spirit animals, that kind of thing. The animal totems that you see, that is all considered a closed practice. It's considered cultural appropriation to use a spirit animal in your practice in the ways that would be done by indigenous communities. Spirit animals do hold a deep meaning and are worked with in very specific ways, and these are sacred to many different indigenous communities. You can have an animal guide, but there is a specific way to go about that to not cross a line into the spirit animal realm. It really is just, say you work with a deity that has a specific animal that you like to reach out to that represents them, that's different than the way that Native American culture worships spirit animals. It also is kind of insensitive with the fact that our culture has tended to make spirit animals a meme. So,
Yep. Many people assume their familiar is an animal that you see all the time. However, this can be an animal omen instead. Maybe you work with Apollo and you constantly hear crows squawking or have bees follow you around. These may be omens from your deity. Familiars will stick around for much longer and will make themselves known by showing a special attention to you beyond just a sign.
yeah, so I feel like we all tend to see signs from different animals. Amaya and I, we were just talking about this last week with bees specifically for her. And for me, it's crows. I see crows a lot. Deer as well are a big sign for me. So you kind of have to differentiate between what is a familiar and what is a sign. If it's just like a thing at a passing glance, most likely it is a sign rather than a familiar. So, pets that are familiars. Some pets can be familiars, however, there tends to be a certain line drawn that constitutes a familiar. For example, if your cat leaves you whiskers on your altar or other sacred space and you always find them, they may be a familiar. Or if your cat comes and lays next to you while you meditate, they may be a familiar. This can occur with any type of animal that you have as a pet. Maybe you have a hedgehog and it only loses quills while sitting on you and remains calm in your lap while you meditate. The relationship with a familiar tends to be one that is beyond a normal pet bond and is beneficial to your magic practice. So, like, cat whiskers can be used in a number of different ways in magic. Same with like a hedgehog's quills. There's a lot of different things with animals that can be used within your magical practice. I am going to talk a little bit about my familiars. Amaya, do you know who my familiars are?
Yes, they're your kitty cats.
Yeah, I know how basic of me to have cat familiars. So, whenever you are trying to decipher whether something is just an animal or a familiar, there's kind of some ways that you can go about it, as well as like, how do you get a familiar? How does that happen? So, one of the big thing is that that animal is going to choose you. So I'm going to talk to you guys about my cats and why they are my familiars. So I have two cats named Hex and Obsidian. Hex is an orange cat, Obsidian's a black cat, and I got them from a local shelter. I didn't expect to come home with a familiar when I adopted them, let alone two, but they were very much so kind of chose me. So I had went to the shelter with the intention of adopting a cat to have as a companion. Right off the bat, Obsidian came over to me. His name was actually Jeremiah back then, but I changed it. And he very much so was rubbing all over me and wanting attention from me, and I was like, "Okay, this is going to be my cat." He got up on my lap. Then our sassy little Hexy boy decided that while I was petting Obsidian, he was going to jump on my shoulder and demand my attention. So I would pet him for a little bit and then I would sit him back down because I kind of already had in my head, like, okay, this black cat, how fitting, I'm a witch, is going to be mine. So he would then jump back up onto my shoulder and just kept insisting on being right here in my face and meowing at me if I didn't pay attention to him. So I was fortunate enough to be able to adopt both of them. Since bringing them home, Obsidian has definitely become the familiar who is more involved in my ancestor magic. Whether we're baking one of my Gram's recipes, I light a candle on my ancestor veneration altar, or I am just sitting talking to my loved ones who have passed, he's always there. There's been times where we've like been baking something of my Gram's and he will come and take a bite of it and look at us because it doesn't taste right and like meow at us. And then we taste it and we're like, "Oh, you're right, Obsidian, we forgot something." It's so bizarre. Like there's no way a normal cat would be able to do that. Um Now Hex on the other hand, he is my little chaos master. So it's very fitting for his name. However, he is kind of the most bizarre witch familiar that I have ever seen. So he's always around when I'm working on like the next witchy product for my shop, whether it's candles, whether it's, packaging herbs, whatever. He is like up in my face, wanting to be a part of it. He also loves the stickers that I make that are witchy. He like doesn't if there's zodiac signs, he doesn't want anything to do with them. However, like the ones that have to do with like to be fair, the moon was full and I was left unsupervised, he's right there. He's watching them being cut in the cricket. It's bizarre. Um, but also, I'll be doing spell work, and there'll be times where he goes over to my shelf and grabs a baggie of herbs in his mouth and has brought it over to me. And it's like never something I would have thought about putting in the spell. I end up using it because clearly I needed it for some reason. However, he also, like, if I walk away, like, to use the restroom whenever a candle spell is burning, he will sit there on the floor at my altar and just stare at it intently, making sure that it doesn't fall over and cause a fire. Like, I have never seen a cat act this way. He also, whenever I finish a spell jar, will pick it up in his mouth and, like, move it to somewhere else on my altar. Like, I don't get it. He leaves me whiskers all the time. Obsidian does too. Um, but yeah, so if you really do want a familiar, you really should take some time, meditate on it, and then leave an offering to a deity or spirit that you work with, asking them to send you one. You can't force a familiar to come to you, but when it does, it will make sure you know it is a familiar. I did not expect those two cats to be familiars, and clearly they do everything that they possibly can to help aid and guide me. So they're little weirdos, but I love them.
I'm a proud auntie of Hex and Obsidian. I've never met them a day in my life, but they're the cutest.
You've met them through video calls.
Pretty much. When they're not being shy or moody, they'll come say hello. So next are familiars as ancestor guides. In some traditions of witchcraft, it's believed that familiars come to us as a way for our ancestors to visit. Their spirit can more easily reach you through the animal in your home. You may notice this by a pet that participates in certain activities you did with a past loved one, or a pet that specifically tries to steal a bite of that loved one's favorite food, hence Elle's story. While the loved one's spirit isn't always in the animal's a way for them to contact you.
Yeah, so we fully believe Obsidian is my Graham's vessel to come and visit us. Like there's no other way to explain it. The things that he does, the way he acts, like it is so much like my grandmother sometimes. And there's also kind of a theory with a cat in particular's eyes, right? So most of the time they have the cat eyes, right? Where they're like the skinny pupil, very sharp looking. However, whenever their eyes transition to the more wide pupil and look more like human eyes, a lot of people believe that that is like when your ancestor is visiting you through the animal. We very much so think that Obsidian is my Gram, and we think that, well, Obsidian is the cat that my Gram comes to us through. And we think that Hex is very much so her boyfriend that was like a grandfather to me because my grandfather passed when I was very young, Ron. And my mom kind of confirmed this because we had an inkling about this is, who was coming to visit. He used to always eat those Neapolitan coconut bars. I don't know if you've ever seen them. That was like his thing. Terrible for a diabetic man, but he loved them. So whenever he wanted a little sweet treat, that's what he had. My mom had gotten one when she was missing Ron the one day because he was like a second father to her. Hex came over and started licking that thing like just like it was his treat. My mom didn't put it up to him. He just came over, sniffed it, and started licking it. Like he knew exactly what it was and he wanted some. Yeah. So now
That
we're
that sounds cute.
we're gonna talk about some common animals that can be familiars, and we're just gonna kind of talk about like the associations with them. So I will go ahead and just do some of them, and then you can do some more of them, Amaya, and we'll just kind of like switch about halfway through because there's a lot. I also put them in alphabetical order. So we're gonna start with bat, which is a bat is very much so about perception, psychic powers, and intuition. Bears are going to be strength, courage, and leadership. Beavers are about cooperation, resourcefulness, and vision. Bees are about connection, abundance, and wisdom. Butterflies are about metamorphosis or change, release, and then higher consciousness. Cats, patience, independence, and grace. Cows, abundance, luck, trust. Crows are about transformation, wisdom, intuition. Deer, vitality, innocence, and gentleness. Dogs, bravery, loyalty, and devotion. Dragonflies, intelligence, grace, and meditation. Ferrets, adaptability, cleverness, and flexibility. Foxes are playfulness, agility, mischief, and frogs are renewal, abundance, and health.
All right. So goats represent confidence, loyalty, and independence. Hawks are considered the stop of time or messengers. Hedgehogs represent curiosity, enjoyment, creativity. Horses represent freedom, force, and balance, and courage. Lizards represent dreams, healing, survival. Moose, strength, patience, and surrender. Owls are wisdom, observant thinking, and courage. Rabbits are creativity, innocence, peace. Rat or mouse represent adaptation, strength, and determination. Ravens, intelligence, prophecy, and rebirth. Raccoons, assertiveness, disguise, intelligence. Robins, renewal, truthfulness, and positivity. Roosters, pride, bravery, and confidence. Snake, opportunities, transformation, and focus. Swan, purity, innocence, and transformation. Wolves represent wild nature, ferocity, and loyalty.
Did you know that there could be this many different types of familiars?
I knew a few of them, but not that many.
Yeah, there's even more, but it tends to be like, so I've told you the story, and I think I've also posted it on my business social media about how I always get a barn spider every year outside the shop this time of year. And it's always a female. She creates this gorgeous, gorgeous web. And that because they're orb weavers, they're not dangerous to humans. And then she lays an egg sac in my gutters, which is what happened last year. And then she dies. That's just kind of how their life cycle works. And I say that that's like my fall familiar with the shop. It's kind of like a representation of creativity and to keep going. So I had one last year. I have actually three this year. I don't know if they're all females. Only one of them has what looks like they're going to lay an egg sac. However, Darian is so freaked out by spiders, and he's like, I don't know how you can just let that thing there. And I'm like, it's outside, it's not hurting anyone. Leave my spider alone.
I have a shower spider.
Yeah.
Yeah, it eats all the ants in my house. So I let it live. As long as it doesn't jump on me while I'm washing myself and, stays in its little corner and I stay in my corner, we're okay.
Well,
Okay.
and that's like also talking about like animals as signs or insects as signs. Daddy long legs specifically. I have had so many of them on my door at the shop, but they're a sign of protection. Like they mean
Yeah.
divinely protected. And Darian's like, why do you just leave them there? And I'm like, because they're outside and they're not hurting anything and they're protecting us from people's bad vibes.
Yeah. No, I don't mind spiders, but like the daddy long legs do creep me out a little. They're just, ugh.
I was
But
the kid that used to pick them up and like take them outside while everyone else was screaming. Because they can't
yeah.
bite you. Their mouths are too small to bite humans, so
Oh, interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of spiders, but they kill the centipedes and the ants that I get in my house, so it doesn't really matter. They
Yeah.
do their
We
job.
have a lot
That's
of
their right.
spiders in the garden too, specifically orb weavers, common garden spiders. And I say to Darian, I'm like, they're keeping our plants from being eaten alive. Just leave them alone.
Yeah. I mean, I'm okay with a spider as long as it does its part in the ecosystem, we're good. All that being said, let's get right into tarot time.
right, what does the collective need to hear today, Spirit? We've got the Four of Discs in reverse. This is a lack of stability. Maybe you are clinging on to, so in this deck, discs are pentacles, so maybe you are trying to cling on to money that you have acquired, even though you should be spending some of it for things that you need. This is very much so about insecure money habits, not feeling like you are ever going to have that stable and secure kind of future. Whenever this is upright, it's usually telling you that, like, yes, you have acquired some money, but you don't need to be so, like, stingy with it. When it's in the reverse, it's kind of like warning you, like, you need to fix your relationship with money a little bit. So, definitely keep an eye out with that. Don't be overindulging in spending, and also don't be afraid of spending money on something that you need. If you need it, pay for it. The money will come back. I'm a firm believer in that.
Money comes, money goes. That's all I gotta say. Don't ask me about your spending habits because I will always tell you to buy something even if you don't need it. Guilty as charged. Anywho, let's get right into Astrology Almanac.
Today, the moon in Pisces will trine with the sun in Scorpio. Now is the time to make yourself comfortable and stick to what you know best. Then on the 4th, Mars will enter Sagittarius, which will heighten your energy and drive when it comes to exploration and adventure. On the 5th, we have a full moon in Taurus, which this will help you to remove blocks that are keeping you from feeling stable and secure. Finally, on the 6th, Venus will enter Scorpio, which can help with being more passionate to your connections and relationships that you hold close to you. You may have a desire to pursue intimate endeavors and really buckle down on seeing who has a sense of loyalty to you.
Thank you guys for tuning into another episode of Sister Sister, a podcast for spiritual baddies. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, like, comment, share, and follow on Instagram and TikTok, where we post clips every other day of the show, even though you should watch the full episode anyway because we're so funny. We love you. See you next week.
Bye, guys.